It's said that sometimes decades happen in weeks. A case in point now is Syria. In the blink of an eye, Islamist rebels have overthrown the Assad dictatorship. In response, the U.S. has attacked ISIS strongholds there. Israel has destroyed Syria's military infrastructure and occupied a buffer zone along the border. Iran's axis of resistance has been severely weakened. So this is a time of risk and a time of opportunity in the Mideast. Donald Trump takes office 1 month from today. So Ben, how should he respond? It's a tough one.
Yeah, well, he says one thing now, but his actions are going to speak louder. The reality is we already have military there in the Northeast.
Apparently we have more than
2,000
than we thought. There's a couple thousand there, not just 800 or 900.
Yeah, in addition to that, it is a breeding ground for ISIS, which Trump's first administration was highly active in trying to dismantle. And on top of that, this part of the region is where Iran is able to get supplies to the Houthis, which is significantly going to be impacted because they're not going to be able to utilize the land like they've been doing.
Okay, but so what if you're the president of the United States? What do you do? I mean, Trump has said that we should have nothing to do with it. Jenny, can we have nothing to do with it?
It's very challenging, right? We have watched the United States, unfortunately, really mess up, frankly, the political environment in the Middle East. The war in Iraq was a disaster. The war of Afghanistan was also deeply, deeply problematic. The United States has a tendency to go into countries where we do not understand the culture, the communities, the history, and the religions. And as a result, we don't know who our friends are, who our foes are, and we end up causing more damage, from my perspective, than good. And so putting boots on the ground, being involved, I'm actually very sympathetic to incoming President Trump's position here. On the other hand, we also do have an obligation to try to create stability. And the United States historically has a reputation of bringing some stability when we're not doing stupid things. And so soft diplomacy and really working closely with our allies to establish that there isn't increased terrorism, that there's not new hotbeds of challenge in the Middle East is really important.
So, Chad, you said soft diplomacy. There are diplomats, American diplomats there right now trying to work with the, I don't know, we can't call it a regime yet. I'm not sure what we'd quite call it.
Yeah.
To work with HTS. And there's a question about whether you should take them off the terrorist list, which they're currently on. I'll crib some notes from one of my students, Sawyer Brown, on this one. I think some of those questions depend on how you feel about Idlib, which is a city in northwest Syria that's been under HTS control since 2017. They gained control with an authoritarian hand. But outlets like the New York Times and the BBC have reported that they are trying to relax their rules and rebrand to shed their al-Qaeda roots. And it claims to want to be a Syria for Syrians and protect minority groups and that sort of thing. Another one of my students, Ty Pham, has suggested that the U.S. could leverage its oil-rich areas that are basically U.S.-backed Kurdish control in the Northeast, like you had talked about, and negotiate with Syria's, we'll call it the new government, ultimately to try to remove HTS from the terror list if they continue in these ways that they've promised.
So your students are all over this.
They're smarter than I am.
I'm not sure how much oil is really at play here.
There's a lot of oil in the Northeast.
Yes. Yeah, that was 40% of their annual income.
Now, the incoming president, you said you're sympathetic to, this is a tough issue for anybody. His envoy to the Mideast is his daughter's father-in-law, and he's also appointed Tom Barak, who is a real estate developer, I think, as a ambassador to Turkey, is it? So do we have the right people there? Although Marco Rubio, as a Secretary of State, is,
right.
It seems like a player.
You see, first of all, what ultimately are our goals and how are we going to accomplish those? And those are the types of things that we have not had clearly delineated, a number of the conflicts that Jenny mentioned. And how do we accomplish them? And so again, I am also sympathetic. But the problems of Trump's proposal of just staying out, or what are those consequences, and who's going to fill the void, and are you really willing to live with the consequences of what comes out of, there's this feeling that the bad guys fight against each other, but who's the baddest of the bad guys, and who do we want, and what do we want to see happening? Again, much beyond my level of expertise, I do worry about Trump having the right people giving him advice on this.
I'm really worried about the Kurds. There are 30 to 45 million Kurds in the world. They might be the world's largest ethnic group without a state. They represent 25% of Turkey's population, and they've been a U.S. ally in our fight against ISIS, like Ben had mentioned. But Turkey views them as a terrorist organization. They don't want a Turkish enclave with autonomy, but we can't have Turkey destabilizing this region. The Kurds currently hold 9,000 ISIS fighters in prison. That alone necessitates our involvement here.
Right. ISIS fighters and their family members in the area where the U.S. is present.
Right.
So
and just real quick, I know we want to move on, but the drug trafficking that has been uncovered there is $2.5 billion in Capticon drug, and that's out of the 10 billion that's worldwide. So that industrial level amount of drug trafficking is going to be utilized by somebody, probably ISIS if we don't help in some way.
So this is going to be a big problem on the first day for the incoming president.